I want to share. I wrote a fiction horror novel, and it is entitled Lawless Kane. And I wanted to share a little bit of it that I wrote. In a dying world parallel to ours, where the forces of order wage war against the forces of chaos, a man who was betrayed and left for dead by his family seeks revenge on them, and in the process discovers he must play a part in saving what is left of humanity from itself. I sent my soul through the invisible, some letter of that afterlife to spell, and by my soul returned to me and whispered, I myself am heaven and hell. Taken from The Secret of Abounding Happiness by James Allen. Prologue. I was left for dead. Father was insane. My brothers were too blind to reason with. I was born 4 years after the rapture. Back then I had no identity. I tried to stop Father, tried to reason with him that life was still sacred, even to my own detriment. For that, I was thrown by my brothers into a vast land of canyons where the oceans used to flow, known as the Anubis. I was left for dead. I lived. And now, I'm coming for my brothers. Caveat lector, Latin, means let the reader beware. Earth, early 1900s. The world was coming to an end. The weapons of mass destruction created by mankind had ushered in the era of Armageddon. In the last days, oceans had all but dried up. Radiation poisoned the skies. Wildlife were quickly becoming extinct. Money held no value and food was scarce. Many survivors had chosen to eat their own kind in order to live. Look ye now upon a world which could be. A world where law is dictated by the gun and the savage. Children were being sold into slavery to the most vile creatures for anything from target practice to demonic sacrifice to sex slavery. Buildings had crumbled, left in ruins. In this timeline of the world, killers lurked in every corner. This is the continent called Kadim. You might have called it Australia once. The world had changed to what greatly resembled the Old West of early times. The radiation created human monstrosities with mystical strengths. They roamed abroad, groups called umbrages. Parties of thuggish brutes and vile savages ran the cities. Most places in the world still had small reserves of water, yet this never prevented those from stealing water from other umbrages. In all, this life was gloomy and hopeless. The earth decayed steadily before the eyes of those left behind. It was all coming to an end. Many years had passed since the rapture. The Creator had returned as was written and swept away many people. Yet the event was not extravagant as many had imagined it would be. No, indeed. Yet and still, the will of man to survive is one of mankind's most basic and truest of instincts, and so the people, and the no longer people, lived on in hell, as they would, until the very end. After the initial events of the rapture came what was called the era of the gathering. The religions had died along with much of their knowledge. It was forgotten in the gray mist of desolation. Very few remembered them. Of those that did, a new order came into being, the lawless ones. They called themselves, for they were those priests, rabbis, gurus, imams, and others that were left behind and seemingly deemed unworthy by the very God that they worshipped. 1/4 of the world's population remained. The lawless ones among these survivors fought against those who would oppress and kill what was left of humanity, though all mankind did not agree with how they accomplished this. This was before another army came into being, called Death Lords. The Death Lords were mutanoid beings and corrupted miscreants, united by an ingeniously ruthless man calling himself Apophis Asmodean. He became legendary as being spawned from unknown depths to lead an army against the lawless ones and all that stood in his way. After many battles, both armies had accomplished nothing but murder. Both became so depleted in forces that the Death Lords themselves migrated underground and planned for a timely strike in the future that would crush their enemies and lead them to rule what they called the realm of the devil, with no adversary to challenge their might. The lawless ones chose to flee to a country they called Godhead. Very few remembered it as Canada from the old world. There they set about many quests to obtain mystic secrets which would prove the deciding factors in who would govern this wretch of a world once and for all. And so it is, and always shall be, by the laws of motion that state that any force moving must naturally have a force to oppose such movement. The Death Lords were that opposing force, and the war with them marked the end of the era of the Gathering and ushered in a new era of mayhem and death. The lawless ones had among them some who began to question their own faith. Many questions came then as to whether the Creator had truly abandoned them or not. What was the purpose of this new life left unto them? It was a question that some kept within their hearts and would bring about a different war from within their very own ranks. But we shall soon see to that. With the withdrawal of the governing guidance and lawful influence of the lawless ones in the world, many changes began to occur amongst civilian life. One of the major changes to occur involved the advancement of science and the art of causing change to consciousness in accordance with will, magic. In reality, what is true is that science is not a problem in the world, and never has been. Yet the lawless ones knew that human greed and desire for power is behind every problem that exists to mankind, and that the destructive forces responsible for the downfall of the old era of humanity came about because of these things man holds to be power. And it was this way that led to the event the world called the rapture. But this time, there would be no salvation. No, indeed. And so it was that a traveler, once an acolyte priest of the holy order of the lawless ones, found that greed of mankind. And in finding it, he had also found himself in a very peculiar turn of events. On this peculiar day, we meet our traveler in a bar somewhere in the northern part of Australia, now called Kadim, the old name of this country forgotten as if the Lord of creation had erased the memories from the minds of men to displace from them a time which no longer existed, as we shall see. He wore a cowboy hat pulled down over his eyes. A home-rolled cig lay to the left side of his unreadable mouth. Stitching covered the edges of his lips, very peculiar. A heavy brown trench coat he wore, ragged from long travels abroad. Knee-high black boots fitted to his legs, and travel-worn black jeans covered his lower body. He sat at a table in a corner of a candlelit saloon. He sipped a shot of brandy wine. 2 ice cubes clanked softly in his glass. An old west feel enveloped the place. Neither rich nor dead, damned nor poor, powerless to fight the land of the scorn, torn from life, given unto hell, in memory of naught save the day earth fell. Part of the prologue of my book, Lawless Cain. Thank you for listening.